Hey, afternoon, and welcome to the Jane and Jeremy episode on what are some top things you should really be thinking about when you're beginning to think about investing in a franchise. Lots of people think it's a cool idea, they're curious, and they just don't really know where to begin to think about. So they focus on concepts first, meaning brands, food, things they like, things they go to, fitness, versus backing it up and really thinking about what's most important before you even consider which industry category. So that's what we're going to focus on today. And Jeremy and I have found there's four things that are really the key concepts that we're going to talk to you about right from the get-go. The first and most important being, what is your income expectation? Are you replacing a $300,000 a year salary? Or are you looking for an absentee or semi-absentee business that will generate, some sort of a return on investment? What does that look like for you? What will all of this trouble and hassle be worth if you hit a certain number? And what is that number that you are seeking? And we, of course, are going to remind you endlessly that doesn't happen in the beginning. So one of the things we'll talk about with you is, what do you need to make? When do you need to make it? That is 100% going to drive where we go to start thinking of industries and categories. And Jeremy, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add to that piece on income. I'm going to then next talk about financials and net worth.
Yeah, I think the only other thing I would add is that it's that kind of like runway as well as to just how you, as you touched on, how long, but also kind of how's that going to build up? What's your financial position? In that first 12, 18 months, do you have other sources of income, or do you have enough money put aside that you can live on? And do you need to skinny back your expenses, if maybe you've come out of the corporate world? And so really looking at that, I think is critical, as you say, Jane.
Yeah, absolutely. And financial runway is the key, because many businesses aren't going to cash flow for 12 to 24 months. And that's why businesses fail. It's the number one reason. So just making sure that you have, because if you need a fast ramping business, then we're going to be looking at a very specific category. If you can afford to pay your bills for 2 years out of your asset base, great. We have a lot more flexibility there. And the second component, closely tied, is your financial situation. People don't realize that our industry, the sales of franchises, is pretty heavily regulated by the Federal Trade Commission. And as such, most brands are going to have a minimum net worth requirement and a minimum liquidity requirement. And they really don't want to talk to you for their concept that maybe has an $800,000 build out and equipment and total investment range to get going if your net worth is $250,000. So we're going to ask you about your net worth. We're going to ask you about your liquidity, because we know what can get funded with the SBA, and right now the SBA is tight. So really, until you have 100,000 in liquid capital and 250,000 in net worth, that franchising is just really not something that you should consider. There may be some lesser brands, some smaller brands, some things you can do that are under that, but that's really the minimum sort of threshold for which you will have some flexibility and options out there. Jeremy?
And I think just on that, one of the things we'll always work with you on is getting kind of a pre-qualification. We have partners that we work with who will look at that information in detail. We can do it at a high level, but they will actually take you through a complimentary pre-qualification, which I think is also critical if you're using a reasonable percentage of your net worth and your liquidity. I mean, for some people, it's not not an issue. But for most of our clients, it does come to the equation.
Yeah. And one thing to consider right now is the banks are going to be looking for your, first of all, you need your 20% capital infusion of whatever the loan amount is. But then you also, they're strongly right now looking at post loan closing liquidity. So once you've gotten the loan, how much capital do you have? And they're going to be looking to see if you have enough money to pay the bills of the business, to pay your personal bills, and just have, working capital for at least 9 months. So it's just getting tighter right now. All right, next let's talk about what are your strengths? Are you a leadership guy or woman? Are you more task oriented? Are you strong in business development, or an introvert who really just kind of wants to look at the data? What those strengths are going to be really important, because in every business, there's going to be an aspect of business development. There's going to be an aspect of monitoring the KPIs. And what we want to do as your advisors is steer you toward brands that you can capitalize on your strengths, and that there's some sort of system in place or support structure to compensate for your weaknesses, besides just hiring for that role. I don't know if you have anything in particular, or
I think the only thing I would add on that is I think it's really important to put yourself in the shoes of an owner, because that owner role can be really different. If it's a B2C business that's driving customers through through digital advertising, and you're really more focused on assembling a team, managing a team, maybe with employees that are very different to what you've been used to in the corporate world. Or kind of if it's a B2B where you're out, kind of having to network, build relationships with businesses, and a good element of cold calling. If you haven't done that, or you're not comfortable with that, it's often hard out of the gate to hire somebody to do that, because the expectation is the franchisor thinks that the owner is going to do that off at the start, and then kind of backfill. So I think that role of the owner is really important to think through. And obviously, again, we spend a lot of time on that as we try to find the right models for you.
yeah, so true. And finally, this one is my thing that I look for and will be listening for on so many calls, and that is really grit. I think it's the number one driver of success once you own a business, and without it, I think it's you're sunk. There are so many things that will go wrong in your first year. There are so many things that will be unexpected, and you have to think quickly, act quickly, be prepared to make decisions, deal with your disappointments, and push through. I mean, I know Jeremy can speak to this. He's started 2 businesses. He's had disappointments. He's had, just the unforeseen crap that's going to come up on a regular basis. It just takes a special kind of person. Tell me what your thoughts are
I
on
think
that.
unforeseen crap is a good description. Yeah, look, I think you have to be able to make decisions, and if that's stopping doing something, maybe it's an uncomfortable decision, having to spend more on marketing than you thought. Yeah, I think, and I think we see the red flag when somebody's looking at a bit, going through looking at businesses, and they can't make a decision. They want to talk to the 15th person to validate with. Maybe the answer there is, if you can't make a decision running your own business, it is very different to being, to even running a business in a corporate environment, because there's always that umbrella of kind of safety, I think.
And having to fire people because, and you're friends with them, you like them, but they're not doing the job. Yeah. And I would say if someone has grit and they really don't have any business experience, any sales experience, you'll succeed before the guy who has everything else, but not the grit. So I just think it's really, really important to do a self-analysis and be honest with yourself. And how do you deal with disappointment? Do you just crawl into bed and pull over the covers, or do you get out there and fight? And you have to fight when you own a business. Well, that was fun. Okay, well, thanks for listening, and follow us on Vimeo or YouTube, and we'd love to hear your comments. And thanks for listening.